Our goal with ReCourage is to fill you and to fill you with some good, solid teaching, thought-provoking teaching, to fill you with some great snacks, and to fill your spirit with some good moments of worship. If I had to boil down what our one-day ReCourage conference is, it's to just encourage faithful people to remain faithful. And there are some phenomenal conferences out there that are about strategy and how to build a great team and setting goals and accomplishing goals. And our goal with ReCourage is just to kind of say, we want so much for you to serve out of a healthy heart. And so it's more of a heart conference than anything else. And we're going to have our worship team come out in a bit. We'll have some singing, and Aaron will close us. But I have an opportunity to give you just a final reflection. And I want to talk about what I believe is one of the most extraordinary lives we find in our Bible. And the title of this talk is The Tabitha Factor. The Tabitha Factor, and the extraordinary woman we find, a hero of the early church. Her name is Tabitha, and we find her described in the book of Acts. So let's dive into this passage together. Let's go back. Just a quick map here. Jerusalem is here where the Jesus movement begins. We're over on the coast where Joppa is. Tabitha is part of the Jesus community in the city of Joppa over on the coast. And here she's described to us. We find these words. In Joppa, there it is, there was a disciple named Tabitha. Now, she had two names. In Greek, her name is Dorcas. And she was always doing good and helping the poor. That's her profile. That's her resume. Describe Tabitha. She's a Jesus follower, a disciple. She is like always doing good and helping people who are not highly advantaged in life. Always doing good and helping the poor. Now, tragedy strikes this church. We read in the next verse about that time she became sick and she died. Her body was washed and it was placed in an upstairs room. Now, Peter, the disciple, is a short distance away. People travel over to get Peter, and they say, you've got to come to Joppa. We've got kind of a church emergency here. This dear woman that we just absolutely love has passed on. Peter travels to Joppa, and he's walking up the stairs to get upstairs to where her body is laid out, and he can hear the weeping before he sees it. And when he gets upstairs and walks into this room, it's like he's at a widow's convention. We find these words, all the widows stood around him, around Peter, crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made them while she was still alive. Just imagine this. Peter walks upstairs, he walks into the room, and there are these women walking up going, she made this for me. She made this, and maybe it was clothing that they were wearing. She made this for me. She made this for me. She made this for me. Now, it's different now, being a widow these days. But in the ancient Near East, if your husband passed and you didn't have an adult son to take you into his house, if you didn't have a family to go back to, if you were alone, things could get really hard, really fast. And Tabitha seems to be looking after these women. Now, what does clothing mean? This is more to clothing than clothes. First of all, it's warmth. Joppa's on the coast. The Mediterranean winter winds come whipping in. Clothing meant warmth in the colder month. To provide clothing was to provide warmth. But in addition to that, I think it was dignity. If you were a widow and you had very little means of support, to wear something new made you feel better about yourself instead of being in something ragged. And so I think it provided warmth and it provided dignity. I think it also provided hope. Because when Tabitha makes something for you and brings it to you, you kind of go, You're not alone. I'm not alone. And maybe you feel God's care through Tabitha's care, that God sees you because Tabitha sees you. She's making these clothes. What do the clothes mean? Warmth, dignity, and hope. Tabitha is one of the most extraordinary people in the life of the early church in the book of Acts. Now here's a question. What did the woman do? I mean, functionally. I mean, day after day. It doesn't say she bought the clothes. The women come up and they say, look what she made for me. So walk by Tabitha's door on a Tuesday morning and look into her house. Functionally, what is Tabitha doing? Tabitha spends her days, I'll give you a clue. Tabitha spends her days sewing. Is it just me, or does that seem not like very interesting to you? Tabitha spends her day sewing or weaving or knitting or whatever you would do back in that day to make clothes. This is the Tabitha factor. The Tabitha factor is that you usually don't live an extraordinary life by doing an extraordinary task. You live an extraordinary life by doing a very ordinary task. You just have to do it over and over and over and over and over again. That's the Tabitha factor. Above Tabitha's door, there hangs a sign, and the sign reads, "And then she did it again." And then she did it again. And then she did it again. And then she did it again. The enemies of the Tabitha factor are impatience and boredom, because impact just takes time. And anything you have done dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times before just isn't that interesting after a while. Tabitha factor. You live an extraordinary life by doing an ordinary thing with extraordinary consistency and extraordinary faithfulness. So let's just talk about this differential between being effective and our work being interesting. So I've just got a picture here of a bunch of tents next to a river. And so I've got a fictional character. Let's just call him Walter. And Walter has this brainstorm several years back. He loves hiking, camping, backpacking, and he also loves discipleship. That is, that often you can meet with men at a coffee shop or in a church conference room or something like that, but he thinks, if I can get dudes outdoors, hiking together, sitting around a campfire, I think I can get them talking, and I think I can get them opening up like I can't in someone's living room, 45 minutes here and 45 minutes there. So Walter begins to do this thing where he carves out a weekend, invites some guys, and they take off together on this, backpacking, camping adventure. And when he starts out, how should I say this? He's not very good at it. Because it just takes a while to get good at something. And so effectiveness, this is the line of effectiveness. He starts out here. He starts out by asking his friends, hey, you got any old backpacking tent you're not using? And so it was just this hodgepodge of old tents. Some of them are too big. Some of them are too heavy. Some of them have a missing pole. Some of them are from the Carter administration, And so after a while, he realizes, hey, no. I'm going to find out the best, light, moderately priced tent, I can't. And I'm going to buy 24 of them. They have interchangeable parts. There's one set of instructions. They're all rainproof. And so he buys like symmetric tents. In addition to that, he dials in on the menu. Because they're backpacking, it's the trifecta of food. You want it to be good, you want it to be light, and you want it to be fairly easy to make. And so he, over the course of doing retreat after retreat after retreat, finally he dials in on the menu. He discovers, instead of, okay, you drive, okay, I'm gonna get a van, I know where I'm gonna rent the van from, cuts a great deal with the rental company, and hey, this is Walter again. Do you have a van for 3 weekends from now? And he's working with the same person. What's happening here is that over time, the effectiveness is growing. Now, the big deal is the discussion questions. He begins to learn over time, what are the 3 or 4 questions that get guys to listen, that get guys to talk, that get guys to think, that get guys to open up. And he nails down the discussion questions. He puts it in a little workbook that he publishes. Same campground, same hiking trail, same tent, same van, same discussion questions. And there's a point at which effectiveness, it just doesn't go better and better and better, but he hits a level, a consistent, proficient level, and I'm gonna put an E by this here for effectiveness. And over here, I'm just gonna put DI for dialed in. He gets this deal dialed in. So this is the path of effectiveness, because just understand, it takes time to get good at something. And so he does it again, refines it, dialed in. This is the graph of effectiveness. Simultaneously, I want to chart the graph of interest. Interest starts up here. Why does interest start up there? Because it's starter enthusiasm. And we can get excited about anything that's new. But as he gets dialed in, interest begins to drop. Why does interest begin to drop? It's the same stinking tents. It's the same meal. It's the same hike. It's the same campground. It's the same van. It's the same everything. And so as his effectiveness is growing, his interest is falling. And he hits a point somewhere out here where he goes, hey man, I hear that backpacking trip, that men's thing you do. He goes, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna do that anymore. And you go, why? And he goes, it's just not that interesting. Dude, don't quit now. You're finally good at it. In fact, if Walter says to you, it's just not all that interesting, a great 2-word response is, who cares? It doesn't have to be interesting to be good. It doesn't have to be really interesting to be really, really effective. Excitement is overrated. Faithfulness is not a sexy virtue. That capacity to bring yourself again and again and again. Now, I'm not trying to talk you into doing work you hate for the rest of your life. I'm just saying, there's a point, my friends, where newness wears off. Anything you've done over and over and over and over and over again, I think the primary question should be, is it life-giving? Does it nurture? Does it grow people? Does it feed them? Are they learning and growing? At some point I go, you know, I might not find this the most exciting thing in the world, and that really doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say with this effectiveness, interesting thing is this. If everything has to be new and interesting all the time, you will forfeit your greatest opportunity for impact and influence. You might find yourself ditching things just as you're reaching a level of proficiency. getting bored when things get dialed in. Yeah, I think I'll move on to something else now. You might be ditching something in your moment of greatest effectiveness. Can I say that thing earlier? Can I say that again? If everything has to be new and interesting all the time, my friends, we will forfeit our greatest opportunity for impact and influence. That's the Tabitha factor. Then she did it again, then she did it again, then she did it again, then she did it again. Is sitting in a room sewing the most exciting thing in the world? Doesn't matter. So I want you to say two words with me. First, I want you to say the word yawn. And you just say it like you mean it. Ready? Yawn. And now, I want you to say another word. I want you to say the word wow. Ready? 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 Wow. All right. Woman sits in a room sewing. Let's go back. Let's go back. Woman sits in a room sewing. Give me the word. Ready? Yawn. A flock of widows gather to collectively grieve the loss of a woman who meant the world to them because she offered warmth and dignity and hope. Say the word. Next word. No. Wow. Okay, let's try that one more time. This is unrehearsed. Let's go back. Woman sits in a room sewing. Widows gather to collectively grieve someone who meant warmth and dignity and hope to them. Now here you go, this next statement. The only difference between yawn and wow is time and repetition. The only difference between yawn and wow was time and repetition. Let me use another illustration for the exact same point. This image here, picture, this right here is a kind of hero of ours is Charles Mooley. He's a Kenyan, was a wealthy businessman who began to take in street children and literally is taking in thousands of kids in Kenya, Africa, offering them education, clothing, and food. Now, a man in Ada Bible Church many years ago sent a $75 check to this organization, Charles Mooley Children's Family. Say the word with me, yawn. Ready? Yawn. Man sends $75 check. Alert the media. Yeah. Man's name was Bill, and he passed away. We did his funeral here. Guy from Mooley Children's Family approached me sometime later and say, that guy Bill sent us a $75 check. I said, yeah. He said, he did it every month for 11 years. The math, my friends, about 10 grand. What did you say? The only difference between yawn and wow is time and repetition. Guy writes a $75 check, so that's pizza money. Guy writes a $75 check for 11 years. I wish I could be in a position to give $10,000 away. You are. It will just take a really long time. The only difference between yawn and wow is time and repetition. What I'm trying to express is that often we desire to live great lives. And in order to live great lives, we're looking for something great to do. And personally, I think for most of us, that's a big mistake. Because as we're waiting for something great to come along, this great opportunity, when we are discovered, where our unique contribution to the world is seen, as we're waiting for this great thing to come our way, there's an entire parade of good things that go marching by, unclaimed, unseized, and not invested in because they're just not good enough. What if we arrive at greatness the Tabitha way? Not through finding something great to do, but by finding something loving and common and ordinary to do, but we approach it with uncommon faithfulness. The brilliance of this is that what it means is that you do not have to be extraordinarily gifted. You just have to be extraordinarily consistent. You don't have to be extraordinarily gifted. You just have to be extraordinarily faithful. Faithfulness, that capacity to bring yourself to common tasks again and again and again and again. It's not a sexy virtue, but it's good. Anytime an organization or church or family thrives, there is someone that just keeps bringing themselves again and again and again. The greatest commendation that one can receive when they receive the embrace of Christ. Well done, good and not brilliant servant, not extraordinarily gifted servant, faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful servant. May our gracious God give you the strength and the tenacity and the consistency to bring yourself again and again and again. May our gracious God bless you with an extraordinary life through your extraordinary consistency. I'm going to ask our worship team to come back out. They are going to lead us in a couple songs. Then Mr. Aaron Buer is going to come on back up. I need to thank you. I need to thank you for investing in yourselves today. Thank you for carving out a day to learn and grow and to refuel your tank. Your work matters, and I'm so glad that we had this time together.